Hello guys, TKG is here for your comfortable LostArk life. In this video, I'd like to cover the builds of Sorceress, as the last guy was says about the KL build, so I thought it'd be great to share some of the builds for your LostArk journey. Now follow me, I'll show you what you need. Before I start this video, one thing you gotta know, this video is about the Sorceress build in KL. So some of the preference can be a little different with your region and skills or other setting. And of course, this video is only containing about the build of based on statistic of KL server and community right now, as the LostArk itself always try to patch or update the balance between the class by classes. So in the future, the build can be changed too. So watch this video with those consideration and use this video as your reference to your LostArk journey. Let's start with the most basic one first. In this video, I'm gonna cover one of the Sorceress engraving, Choma, known as Igniter. To make it quick, Igniter engraving is more like a class engraving that maximizes DPS while the identity is active. So more like an engraving that has a similarity with the Punisher Slayer or identity relying on classes. So her DPS performance is highly depends on how fast you fill up her identity gauge. So yes, she requires high specialization stat for your smooth and better gameplay. Like I mentioned in the engraving chapter, her base stat is specialization stat if you want some nice damage performance during the PvE contests. Right now, Sorceress has two available combat stat settings, one that uses swiftness stat and critical stat with full specialization stat. In my personal experience, using critical stat is more representative setting in the KL. But if you decided to use the critical stat on your Igniter, you need to use the high level of Crimson Gem for the representative combos of Sorceress, 종해종, Doomsday, Amplification, Doomsday. Also, you need to use the Hallucination or Nightmare set with more flexibility. Specialization and critical stat show low critical rate, so if you got unlucky, her DPS performance can be dropped. So, if your party has a decent and secure critical synergy, try to use the Nightmare set. If not, try to use the Hallucination set. Try to change the gear set according to different circumstances. One more thing, on critical specialization stat is that it has a really slow and heavy control. If you feel some little discomfort about control, you can change the one part on your accessories. Change the one ring to swiftness stat, but in my personal experience, I won't recommend. Swiftness build, however, is easier to access for the new players. Might have a low DPS performance compared to the critical build, still it has a decent and nice average performance. In my personal recommendation, Swiftness build is good setting to go through. Engraving I use in this video is like this. This build is for critical specialization combat stat setting. As I mentioned in the first, if you decided to use the cursor as I do, you gotta switch the gear set effect on flexibility. If your party has enough synergy on critical, you can use the Nightmare set, or in other case, you can also use the Hallucination set. Actually, this setting is the most representative setting on Igniter, and theoretically possible to use the 종해종, Doomsday Identity Doomsday combo, but it is really barely fits the cooldown. If you wish to use the skill combo with better cooldown, I recommend using more than level 8 to 9 Crimson Gem of the Doomsday skill. Or in critical specialization stat, you can use the alternative engraving setting too, which replacing the cursed engraving to adrenals. If you do that, you can have a 60 to 70% of critical rate during the magic amplification. So in this setting, Nightmare set is quite fixed. Of course, it is slightly lower than the cursed setting, but as the critical rate is quite decent, so it'll show you a nice and typical performance during the raid. But use this setting if you are confident about maintaining the adrenals. Most setting is quite typical on critical specialization setting. Also, I've tested the Kim Blum weapon with hallucination set, but I got rejected a lot to join the party. So don't try to use the other setting if you don't want to get stressed to getting the party. Swiftness specialization stat setting has two settings. First, let's look at the precise dagger setting with nightmares. Using hallucination set with the precise dagger will reduce the efficiency of the precise dagger, so the nightmare set is quite fixed. Kind of okay setting, but I think it is just too okay setting, so I recommend this setting for beginners. Might have a bad DPS value, but it is quite cheaper than the typical setting of the Igniter, And also, you can have a more free hands on controls and combo, as the swiftness stat used as an additional stat. Now you only requires low level of Crimson Gem too. Also, you can use the alternative setting too, which replacing the precise dagger to Adrenals with hallucination set. This build has higher value and okay build to use on ancient setting. And also, unlike the raid like Hanamatan that guarantee the high critical rate, hallucination set is quite fixed to use. And of course, as you expect, it might have a bad DPS performance than the critical base stat, but still, it can show you a nice and decent average performance during the raid. Also, with the swiftness stat, you can also feel better on the control. But in my personal experience, most of the swiftness specialization stat can have a little difficulty on getting the party due to bad reputation on those builds. So the choice is yours. My recommendation, I'll say use the swiftness stat on relic setting and change the critical specialization stat when you want to raise your sorceress more than ancient level. And above all, critical specialization is really fun to watch. Basically, whatever you use a setting on your sorceress, I mean swiftness or critical, both settings almost share the same thing. To make a smooth combos and damage performance, there's a several conditions not to forget. Remember that I mentioned about the Punisher Slayer? Maybe you play the Slayer or not, just like the Punisher Slayer mechanic. Igniter Sorceress also has a similarity on a mechanic. First, you need Wells Rune. In my personal experience, higher and many Wells Rune you have, you could start the main skill cycle. I mean you can fill up and turn on identity faster. Second, you know the Doomsday Amplification Doomsday combo in Igniter Sorceress? If you have a high level of Crimson Gem, you can use the skill Doomsday twice in one identity cycle. Roughly, she has a 3 main DPS skill: Doomsday, Explosion, Punishing Strike, and the identity supply skill Frost Skull, Rime Arrow, Esoteric Reaction, Reverse Gravity, and one senior skill, Blaze. Also, you can replace the Reverse Gravity to Squall for counter and fill the Blaze skill tripod. In my personal recommendation is using counter. Most of the LostArk raid is contained in the counter gimmicks or mechanic, so in order to get not reported, or unless you are going with your friend, try to use the Squall. I'm serious. So my skill composition is like this. I use 3 main skill and 3 identity supply skills and 1 synergy and 1 counter skill. As you might expect, in order to make her show you a high DPS performance, you need to raise the tripod of those 3 skills: Doomsday, Explosion, Punishing Strike. And of course, to make a smooth identity supply, you need to raise the Enlightenment and Quick Preps tripod of the 3 identity supply skills. Also, if you wish to make a nice DPS performance, you can use the fast tripod of Rime Arrow, but if you have a low level of specialization stat, you could have a problem with your identity supply. Gem setting is quite simple. You need Annihilation Gem for 3 main DPS skills and 1 Crimson Gem for Doomsday. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have a high level of Crimson Gem on Doomsday, you can use the Doomsday skill twice in 1 identity cycle. Skill combo is more like a reference. You need to use the skill combo in more flexibility inside of the raid. But one thing is sure in all Igniter sorcerers. If you want the high damage performance, you gotta use the Doomsday twice in 1 identity cycle. Chaos Dungeon build is more like a preference. You can free to use inside of the Chaos Dungeon. So use this skill set as just a reference to your LostArk journey. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching everyone, and always thanks for your big support. Hope this video was a little help for your LostArk journey. And of course, if you get used to the identity supply, you can experience the full performance of her very soon. And of course, if you like my videos, hit the sub for more upcoming infos. I'll come back with more useful infos in the next video.